Hi, my name is Jay Rothman, and welcome to Real Men, Real Talk Live. Welcome to the show. My name again is Jay Rothman, and I am the host of Real Men, Real Talk Live. I am joined in the studio this evening with Charles Maddox coming in from Tampa, Florida. Welcome to the show.
What up?
We got Eris Love Heath, the man of the land from down under, coming in from Australia.
Thank you. As always, my brothers.
We have Jeff Asano coming in, calling his home Nashville, Tennessee, originally from New York area. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mr. Rothman.
You're welcome. We have out somewhere in a bubble, United States. Unfortunately, Josh Richer is on set, working on a major TV show. So he unfortunately is not going to make it in tonight. Perhaps maybe he'll surprise us, but you never know. At this point, it looks like he is not going to be with us this evening. However, gentlemen, it's been another week has come and gone. But we are here. I hope you've all had an amazing week of success in your life. And for those that are joining us live or on replay, thank you for joining us this evening. We are really excited to deep dive into a topic that is true to all of our hearts because most of us have had a lifetime of growing up in a home with a mom and a dad. Tonight's focus is going to be on how has our relationship with our father has impacted and influenced our lives? And obviously there are men and women that maybe didn't have a dad influence in their life. And so that is part of our conversation this evening as well. But some of the areas that I really want to deep dive into tonight is how has our life been impacted by our father's role? Do we blame him for our woes or honor him for it? Have we followed similar life choices based on his belief system? How has the masculine energy of our father hindered or helped guiding us in life? Those are just a couple of highlights that I want to really dig into tonight. And so I know that this isn't just, even though we are a talk show with 4 or 5 men, this isn't just about the relationship between men and their dads, but it's also relationship between females, women and their dads. And so I'd like to open it up to the audience. If you hear something that you like or love with love, please gently tap the like or love button. Light us up tonight. Feel free to share some comments. And we'd like to invite you to be a part of this conversation tonight. So please join in with us. What I'd like to do at this moment is invite Eris Love to really kick the show off tonight and give us your perspective on how, in fact, your relationship with your dad has impacted and influenced your life and why.
Yeah, thank you, Jay Roth, the man, and all my brothers and sisters out there in the collective. Thanks for joining as always. Without you guys and the support that you give us week in, week out, the show couldn't be happening without you. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Well, man, when we talked about this, diving in this week, Jay, and it really brought up a lot of stuff for me again. And, you and I have talked a lot of deep stuff about my story. And I did a little bit of a video this morning. And one of the archetypes, for some reason, that came up when we mentioned about this father-son story was that beautiful story of Star Wars. Now, some of you guys might have seen a little bit of my video this morning. And what I really wanted to get at was this energy that is within all of us. Now, I don't care whether you're a female. I don't care whether you're a male. This masculine energy is the key here. And the thing is about trying to understand, understand, and overstand that this energy is within all of us. Now, I only touched a little bit about my story in that video this morning. And, I had a childhood which saw a lot of trauma. I saw a lot of abuse. and I saw a lot of violence around me. And from those ages of those tender ages of 1 to 13 years old, as we all know, we start to see most of the program, which potentially can play out within our adulthood. Now, you mentioned there, Jay, some of these belief systems, and, you know, if we don't have that particular masculine energy, you know, which should be embodied by the father figure, then we tend to create our own rules. We tend to go out into the world with no guidance. We tend to go into the world a little bit confused. Now, I experienced a love and hate relationship. And from the stuff that I saw as a child between my parents, I was confused, man. I didn't know which way to go. Because when I saw that hate, when I saw a lot of anger, I also saw the love as well. But when I started to realize that this potentially could overlap and recycle into my adulthood, I had to check myself, man. I could feel some of those deeper, darker stuff that I saw as a child coming up within me. So, look, it is a deep, deep subject. I'm looking forward to diving in deep about this energy, because at the very, very root and at the very base of this story, of this beautiful father-son relationship, is the masculine wounding. And to me, on this planet right now, like I said, whether you're a female or whether you're a male, it is the masculine wounding that typically I see with a lot of the issues, problems, and other stuff that's going on in the world today is at the base and the root cause of a lot of the stuff. So, yeah, Jay, I'm looking forward to diving in deep with my brothers here on a Real Men, Real Talk. And, yeah, let's do this.
Yeah, baby. No doubt. No doubt.
Hey, Jay, you're muted, Jay.
I want to take a moment, Ev, just to really honor you for having the courage to share your truth in this moment live as we come in across the globe. You know, it had to be, as a child, very confusing for you to see how your dad showed up in his relationship with your mom, and within hours, sometimes less than 24, he would be showing affection or expressing his love for her. And what some of us, the message we get, the download we get as children is perhaps love is pain. Because if my dad, you know, in your circumstance, if your dad can show up the way he did and then turn it off and turn on the love potion, what message does that send to us as children? We think that's all you knew. So that had to be your norm to some extent, as fearful and as frightful as it was. And so what do we do as children? We consciously and unconsciously emulate the role that our parents had in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And then what do? We tend to repeat it in our relationships. And then we don't understand why sometimes it's not working out.
Mm. Mm.
And that causes us potentially a lifetime of pain.
Yeah.
So part of what I'd like to do tonight in this conversation is really spend some time, I know we'll get there, really looking at how do we break the chain to that? And how do we redefine how we can be healthier role models as the masculine, as men, in our relationships, whether we're in an intimate relationship or if it's with our children, if we have children, our siblings, our friends. How do we break the chain to that behavior?
Well, let's jump into it.
All right.
Let's dive in, Charles.
Jeff, you going to pop this one off?
Well, I want to. I just want to take a step back to what Evis said. For everybody out there, our fathers are our models for the masculine energy. Evis alluded to that. they are our models to what how we learn what the masculine energy is all about. And our fathers teach us our place in the world. So what we see from our fathers, what we experience from our fathers, formulates our definition, our relationship to the masculine energy.
Yeah.
And to look at the masculine energy, and many think that the masculine energy is an aggressive energy, whereas the masculine energy is simply our assertive energy, how we assert ourselves out into the world. So as kids, looking at our fathers, we look at them and see how they asserted themselves out into the world, and that's how we were modeled, whatever that is. Also, the masculine energy, or our father energy, is our most dominant energy growing up. So it's an energy that we look to give us, as I just said, our place in the world. With that all said, and it's about finding that definition for the masculine energy and your relationship to it right now that is based on what our fathers taught us. For me, I spent most of my life trying to get my father to say, "I love you." And I patterned based upon that, based upon seeing that, based upon looking up to my father, putting him on a pedestal. I pretty much followed in his footsteps for all the way up until I was around 40 years old. I followed his path. I followed his advice because, like I said, he was my role model for the masculine energy. He was teaching me my place in the world. So what I was listening from him and learning from him was what he taught me. But I was also yearning and looking and reaching out and trying to get my father to look at me, to notice me, and to say, "I love you." So what I did is, for most of my life, I followed in his footsteps throughout my entire adult life up until I quit my job and completely changed my life. I went into the same business as him at 22 years old. When I was 24 years old, I got married. I got married 2 days after my birthday. My father got married 3 days after his birthday. I got married the same age as my father. So I was doing all of this so unconsciously, replicating his entire life so I would please him. These are my issues. My father didn't have anything to do with it, but these are my issues. And it took me a while, and then finally breaking out of that mold of finding out what I enjoyed. Sometimes we go through life and we have to experience what we don't want until we get to the place of what we do want. And for me, it was doing all of that, thinking, my wounded child inside of me, thinking if I replicated my entire life after my father that he modeled for me, then my father will love me. He will respect me. He will honor me. But it took a while for me to start stepping out of that place, step by step by step, until it actually got to a place where I was so angry and did not like my life because I wasn't resonating with any of that. And it wasn't until I got to therapy that I started to resolve my relationship with my father, and then eventually see him just for who he is, as another human being who went through his process, who was just doing the best he could. But it took me a while through some therapy to do that, then to move into a whole new definition of the masculine energy in my life. And that all began to take place when I turned 40 years old.
Jeff Sano, thank you.
There you go.
You know what I love about this show, Charles, is that when I ask you guys to show up week after week, you do. You show up real, you show up vulnerable, you speak your truth,
Mm.
even when it may not be in alignment with your own family and your friends and even maybe even siblings. But you see, what I've learned in my own journey called life is that even though our siblings and our parents may have grown up in the same home, our experience may be very different. Even though we were in the same room at the same time and the same language was spoken, our interpretation and our reaction to it could be very different. If, for example, Jeff, if you and I were to go out to a restaurant and order the same exact dinner at the same exact time, being served by the same server, your experience and my experience most likely will be different.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just part of being human. And so I really wanted to put that out, as well as to put out, and a number of us still have moms and or dads that are alive. And we hear a lot of parents feel like their children blame them for the things that aren't perfect or their struggle within their life. And there are children that do that. There are adult children that do live in that cycle, that loop of blaming their parents for all the things that they're struggling with. But I will say this to you guys is that I did that. I did that for decades. I was angry. I had a lot of resentment. And I didn't know how to manage it. I just was living in it. And part of the healing journey of what I refer to as coming home to myself so that I could experience what true freedom is, which is inner freedom, was I had to learn how to stop blaming my parents for the things that weren't working out the way I wanted it to in my life. And I needed to, at some point, own it. I needed to take responsibility and stop living in all the stuff that had hurt me in my younger years. And by being able to do that and holding myself accountable, it changed my relationship with myself and with my parents. And I am grateful that I made that decision after having spent decades internally blaming and holding my parents responsible for the things that I was angry at in my life. So Charles, I want to kind of bring it back to you and invite you to open up and share from your perspective, how has your own relationship with your dad? I know your dad has since passed, as has mine. But how were your younger years? How did they impact your adult years, for the better and for the worse? And how are you managing it today?
What's interesting is I didn't even realize certain things until recently. I want to say literally within certain things more so in the last probably couple of weeks, where I've had to kind of look at certain actions or look at certain reactions and kind of look on a whole and say, whoa, I got this here from this parent. I got this here from that parent. I saw my cousin's daughter, which is Rohan Marley, and Lauren Hill is her mother. And she left like a 2-hour message on 2-hour Instagram thing, just going in on her parents and talking about what she went through. And as I'm watching this, I'm blown away in a sense, man. I love her realism. I love her take on what she went through, and understand that now that there are certain triggers that we may not even realize that we're dealing with now that, was there earlier. So, while my dad was a great dad, I always say, man, and trust me, I'm learning here. I'm not, as in the public as I am, I'm kind of like this really, I don't know why, but I'm like this really kind of, I don't like my business out there type of person. It kind of goes against, the whole situation. But, when I look at the things that I did pick up now that I recognize and I have identified I'm like, okay, my dad was a ladies' man in a sense, nice guy, but he was a ladies' man. So I got to see that firsthand. And then once again, because of, my mother was working all day. And then so I was literally just came home, hung out with the fellas around the block in Long Island, and, learned from the fellas how to, be a man in a sense, because my mom was gone and she wasn't a man. And so a lot of things that I'm seeing now that I've picked up that I'm trying to reverse in many ways, and try to make sure that I'm not the same way to my children that my not only father but also mother was to me. And I'm glad to be sharing this because God knows, man, I'm not the type of dude to be getting on here and sharing this, but it's actually become a relief. I'm working on a new series on mental health. And I think I have got to be one of the people who, if I'm going to talk, I got to walk the walk, right? Dr. Denise is on, who's my right hand, and she walks the walk, right? So I want to be more of that, so that people really understand me and not this. I had 2 people last week say I was like Bruce Wayne from Batman, and I'm like, okay, I kind of take it as a compliment, but then I said the whole man of mystery. I'm like, nah, man, that's not what I want to be. But go ahead, Hank. You guys jump in, man.
Beautiful. I love that, Charles.
I love that, Charles. Man of mystery, man. That's what it's about.
I think that works, Charles, to a degree when you are in the dating game. I think what my experience with single women is, initially they are intrigued by that man of mystery. But at some point, I also believe that women want to meet a man that shows up, that knows how to turn it on and knows how to turn it off, and
Right.
show up and be real and show some vulnerability and speak their truth and not be afraid to share.
Yeah.
Because, eventually they get tired of the man of mystery. It's like, who is this man? I'm living with him, or I'm in a relationship and I don't even know who he really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it all centers around shame and judgment of self that we could learn from our fathers. Why we kind of keep that mask up, that veil in front of us, because there's a certain judgment and shame of self that's going on. I know that my father had a lot of that. My father had a lot of judgment and shame of self that I learned from him. But one of the things that just popped into my head as Charles was speaking, I just thought of all the wonderful things I learned from my father. It just popped in of we can, and you know what, I'm just going to take a step back and what Jay said earlier about we can keep on blaming our parents, because that's the wounded child inside of us that is saying, mom didn't do this, mom doing that. And then Jay mentioned about we've got to move into our heart space and our adult space to eventually take responsibility for ourselves, because we're not that 10-year-old, that 5-year-old, that 6-year-old anymore. We're grown adults, and we have to take responsibility for ourselves. So I did the blame game on mom and dad for a long time. I did more so the big blame game on my father for a long time, because he never showed up to say, you know what, I dig you, I love you, you're a great baseball player, and all that good stuff. But what just popped into my head was all the wonderful things that my father taught me, that is a big part of me right now as well, that actually helped me to open myself up and feel vulnerable to other people, because that's one of his wonderful traits that he had. He could open himself up and cry. He could open himself up and really just be that see that vulnerability in him, and that's all going into our truth. It's my father taught me how to be an individual, how to think for myself, how to make choices for myself. He taught me how to be responsible to other people, how to be respectful for other people. One of the biggest things that my father taught me was that everyone is equal, everyone is unique, and everyone is lovable in their own way. And I carry that to this day, even along with some of the things that he showed me on the other side. But one of the things my father showed me in such a beautiful liberal way, and I use that term in the dictionary definition of liberal, is that how to treat people. Always treat people the way we want to be treated. So he taught me some amazing, wonderful things that formed the depth of who I am. There are the other parts that he taught me as far as looking out into the world. And one of the things I had to learn was moving out of what he taught me of survival consciousness. My father was a Depression era man. So he was all about survival, safety, and security. And I had to break out of all of that on my own. And I'm still learning to break out all of that. So what I'd like everybody to look out there, especially the women, like what did you learn from your father about the role of the masculine energy in your life? Because we make choices in our life as adults from what we learned by mom and dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as Jeff just is inviting you, any of our viewers that would like to share with us, post it up and let us know, and maybe we can talk further about that. In the meantime, Jeff, I want just thanking you for sharing the other side of the coin. As Kimberly she said, Jeff, I love how you can look at both sides of the coin. Very powerful, and that takes practice, because when we get into the cycle of just seeing the dark side and not being able to see that, there is also the light. I was on a hike this morning by myself in nature for a couple of hours, and I was really, really deep into thinking about my relationship with my dad growing up. And a few things popped for me. A few things came through. One of them was that although my mom and dad were married till my dad passed back in 16, they were married over 50 years. For me personally, my mom, I believe, had much greater of an influence on my life than my dad did. My dad was a typical first-generation American growing up in New York. He worked hard. He worked long hours. He had the commute, and he'd get home late for dinner many nights. But he got home for dinner, and after dinner, he was wiped out. He'd read the newspaper, and by the end of that exercise for him, it was time for me to go to bed. So my time with my dad was way limited compared to my time with my mom. My mom got home from work earlier. And my mom had more of the communication skills than my dad did. My dad was very much a private guy, private man, private dad. Didn't really, as a son, my mom was way more emotional and way more expressive in sharing what her needs were, whereas my dad was very much more controlled and not accessible the way I would have liked for him to be. But that's just, that's how he was. And what I did cherish about my relationship with my dad was, for me, my dad, on occasion, let's say once a year, would take me to a ball game to see a professional baseball game. And that was the time that he and I got to spend alone, without my mom, without my sibling, my sister. And, for me, for years, I was somewhat angry. I was like, why? I don't understand why I couldn't spend more time with my dad alone, because that to me was like, I really wanted that. And I didn't know how to ask for it. Mm. But what I also realized in this morning's hike, as I was deep in the bush, as they say over in Australia, I realized that through that, and it didn't hit me till today, through that experience, my dad taught me something, which was is that I wanted to show up in a different way for my own 3 sons. I didn't want to be the dad that, and I worked hard. I was a workaholic, no doubt. I had that within me. But I also made sure to spend time alone with each of my sons throughout their childhood and to be very present. I had a career in sales and marketing, so I was able to show up at baseball games and work around a lot of their schedules and be the dad that would pick the kids up from school and be present in a way that my dad wasn't able to. Not because he didn't want to, but because maybe perhaps he didn't think he could. And or it was just that generational thing where that wasn't his role. That's not what he was taught in his own belief systems. But what he gave me was the greatest gift was that I made the choice to change how I showed up as a dad for my own sons. And that's a beautiful gift that I got. And so, in this morning, I actually put on a song that I played at my dad's, when I did my eulogy for my dad's eulogy. I played the song to honor my dad and my mom. I played it as I was in flow this morning. And, it was just my own way of thanking my dad and honoring him for teaching me that lesson, And so there's how we turn the darkness right there into light. We don't have to stay in the old story of feeling the lack of what I didn't have, and be able to really honor and thank my dad for the lessons he taught me and for those times that we did spend together alone so that we could connect, in that masculine energy as Jeff has referred to tonight. Ev, what do you make of all this?
Beautiful, my brother. J. Roth, the man, bringing it home, breaking it down as always. And yeah, I'm piggybacking on both my brothers, all my brothers here tonight, turning up, showing that beautiful, true strength of what this planet needs right now to really heal. And that's that beautiful strength of vulnerability. Brothers are here. I mean, we're giving you tools, tips, and tricks to be able to really heal if there are any wounds that you're going through, to be able to find a tribe of other brothers and be able to open and express some of these deeper emotions that possibly many of us may have bottled up and kept down for so long. And piggybacking on what you've just said there, it was a big part of my life and my childhood as well, because my dad dearly did show a lot about my culture. That's why you see me out in bush. That's why you'll be able to see me out there doing what I do. He did spend a lot of that time, and I did get a lot of that time that you talk about, Jay, that many men that I do help on their journey now, they may not have got that availability. So whether that father was available, whether that father was emotionally available, or whether that father was available and non-emotional, man, there's a lot of different dynamics that we could dive down deep when we talk about this father-son relationship. But to me, like you said, being able to see that beautiful darkness and that beautiful lightness, that is truly who we are. And being able to experience all of those emotions, to me, on this ride that we call life, is truly the full spectrum of what it's all about. So, man, I honor that, Jay. Thanks for sharing that, my brother.
Yeah. Jeff, what do you make of it?
So many things are running through my head right now. My emotions, I'm getting emotional thinking about how much I miss my father, how much I miss talking to him. It's been a long time. My father passed quite a while ago. I was in my 40s when my father passed, about 15 years ago. But I still think about the things I'm still trying to unlearn from him, because I put so much stock into my relationship with him. But I want to go back a little earlier when Jay talked about like how we moved out of the childhood programming of mom and dad. It took me a while until I got into therapy in my early 40s to start to come to terms with all the wonderful things about my father. So it wasn't something that you just turn on and turn off. It took work. It took practice to first break the chains of the child from my father. Let go of continually looking at my father through the eyes of a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, and a 15-year-old, and start looking at my father for who he was as simply a human being. Let go of, I had to break the chain and begin to let go of those attachments so I could step back, look at my individuality, and then just begin to look at my father as a person who had his wounding, his shame, his judgment, and who he was. So it took a while for me to, simultaneously of learning more about me, to shift that relationship with him, because I was learning more about me through my wounding from my father. So once I started to learn all about that, I began to break the chain and then get to that place where I could see him as just a guy. You know, break that change, because when I was 40, 41, 42 years old, I was still looking at my father through the eyes of a 10-year-old, through a 15-year-old. And there are so many people probably right now who are still doing that. We're still looking at mom and dad, and I guess we'll talk about mom at a future show, but look at dad right now. And that's why I'm asking everybody out there, how are you looking at that? Are you still looking at your father through the eyes of a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 14-year-old? And how have you formed relationships with the masculine energy in your life? Other men, your husband, or your boyfriend, based upon the looking at them through the eyes of the wounded 15, 10-year-old and 12-year-old.
Beautiful. Charles, what are you hearing, buddy?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out right now how to fix it, how to make sure we break these sometimes generational curses. I mean, because, the interesting thing is that I think sometimes people find out these things at a later date, later time in life. Look at me, right? I didn't see any of this, years ago. I'm just now seeing some of this. I think one day, like I said, I mentioned I had a story when I was in LA, and I kind of thought of something when I was on my boat, but it's like, it didn't really, continue on since then. And then recently, it's within the, maybe it's a year ago here, I picked up something and kind of thought of something. Then now, but literally within the last probably couple of months, it's been more prevalent where I'm like, whoa, you know what? I can't say, like I said, I'll make that per se a story that he was a good guy, nice guy, great guy. But I didn't get, Jeff, I didn't get all of those type of lessons. I wish I did. And, I try to make sure that I do that now with my children as I talk to, my girls, and pull them to the side and talk to them about certain things, so that, that they could know that, I'm real on many levels, that I drop the ball sometimes, that I love them to death, that, I don't want to be overprotective, even though I'm protective of them. But then even today, I reached out to my son and I said, hey, you know what, man, I wish you were closer, because he's in LA. And I'm like, I wish you were closer so we could spend more time. And he was like, yeah, I love spending time with you, so it's what did I drop in some of that, and what can I pick up and what can I fix to make sure that we aren't like these parents that we hear so much of right now, where dad was like this and mom was like this, and really just try to do our best. I think that's the end of the day. So, but for me, learning a lot of this is literally coming within the very short period of time, and it's a blessing. I mean, I'm glad to be on here talking about this. I normally wouldn't even address this type of stuff. Maybe that's part of the problem. I'm keeping it inside, but it's such a gift to be able to be sharing this now and getting that feedback and understanding that being vulnerable is okay, and that there's people who are watching who are saying, wow, you know what, I love him being vulnerable, I love them being vulnerable, and that being all right. So
beautiful, brother.
Cool.
trying.
Yeah. Hey guys, on a lighter note, this is an old Bill Cosby, and I don't know if I should mention Bill Cosby, but he says the older you get, when you say things, or when, like Charles, when you talk to your kids, stuff like that, is there some place back in the back of your head you go, oh my God, I'm starting to sound like my father? I hear myself saying things to people and going, oh my God, I sound like my father. And Cosby had a thing where he talked about that in one of his routines. My father said that, and I on a lighter note, I heard myself the other day say something and I went, oh wow, I just heard my father.
I love it, Jeff. Love it.
What we learn from our parents is etched into our nervous system. It's etched into our DNA, and we take it because they're our models. And in a younger age, like when we're 3, 4, 5 years old, they're keeping us alive. So the child is always looking at everything through life and death. Our parents are keeping us alive. Even 10 years old, 12 years old, they're keeping us alive. So that's where the wounding starts to take place, and we have to move through that. And that's when you look at relationships. That's why I asked earlier, looking at your relationship to the masculine energy. Are you looking at that as an energy that's going to sustain and maintain you? Recreating the same relationship your parents had. So you could stay alive. So it's always, that's what our parents are there for at the very beginning. And based upon what we see and what happens, we can get stuck there. We can get stuck there.
Which is very masculine energy, isn't it, Jeff? That stagnation. There's no room for flexibility or movement.
Yeah. And that's where mom comes in, and that'll be next week, maybe.
I think we'll get there. No doubt. It's on a rebound. It's interesting when I really look and really give some thought to how my dad and men have showed up in the past. I see a shift happening in the world. I see more men showing up, feeling comfortable, showing their vulnerability, expressing their feelings, even knowing what their feelings are. I remember when I went into therapy back in '95 is when I started, the therapist would inevitably ask me pretty early on, so how are you feeling? And I'd be like, I go right into all the things that I was angry at with my ex-wife at the time. Like I could never answer the questions because my feelings were always tied into someone else's emotions and feelings. But I never could really say how I felt because I didn't even know how to get in touch with my feelings. So by the time I did, the only feelings I had were anger, frustration, and resentment, sadness, and of course behind all that was just a lot of loneliness and fear. And so what I really love about the work we're doing today, the 5 of us, Josh not being with us tonight as he's in a bubble on set, I love the fact that, we as men, we're learning how to show up just on time. And what I mean by that is that, you don't have to be a man. Jeff and Ev, you refer to it as a masculine divinity and divine versus the feminine. And it's not that it's one or the other. The beautiful thing is when we can feel safe enough as men we all have both within us. And it's a matter of knowing when it's appropriate to feel safe enough to express, to be who we are, all of ourselves, not just hone in on the tough guy part, but to feel safe enough to show our feminine divine as well. And I think ultimately in relationships, really that's what makes us whole, as opposed to the imbalance of one or the other. And there are millions of women who lean more towards the masculine divine within themselves than a feminine. And I think that has to do with the influence of the parent in their life, as well as perhaps their relationship with the more dominant parent in the home. And so, for example, Mary Kelly, who's my fiance today, she shared earlier that she thinks that she's got more of her dad's masculine energy that's more prevalent than her feminine. So she is aware of that. Whether or not she's at peace with it, that's for her to answer. I don't know. But half the battle is having the awareness. And through the awareness is then we can pick and choose what we're at peace with and what we're not. And then we could choose to make a change our behavior, practice new behavior to break the chain to what's no longer serving us. But I will say this, guys, it's a beautiful relationship to have with a parent that's not even alive today in this lifetime, because when we're able to learn how to forgive, first ourselves, and then parents that we may be holding on to resentments or wounds, pivotal experience that hurt us, we can still have a relationship even if they're not alive. And that's a powerful statement that I just shared. I've coached men that have had dads that passed 30, 40 years earlier that had never really grieved their loss of the dad in a healthy way. And it's paralyzed them. It's kept them in bondage within themselves. And so part of this conversation really is about what are some of the tools that we can use to break the chain to our old story of our relationship with our dads, so that we can experience a loving relationship, whether they're in our life or they are not. Because whether we realize it or not, they are part of us. And we can't release ourselves from it. Even if we try to physically detach, like I did twice in my adult life, it didn't serve me in any way. I thought it was helping me, but it wasn't. It was actually causing me more of a burden. And so I'd like to really, with what time we do have left in the show this evening, is invite each one of you men to share perhaps maybe a liquid gold moment, pure liquid gold, from your own experience. What can we do as viewers and listeners to change our relationship with our fathers in a healthy way? What could that look like, and how do we get there?
Definitely.
Go ahead, Ev. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Look, for me personally, I think, when we've talked in previous shows, Jay, I've mentioned where I had a lot of that resentment, I had a lot of that anger, frustration and confusion from that childhood memories, that I channeled my anger, my frustration, some might say bit of hate, into my body. I channeled it into a masculine energy that was driving and released, that wasn't going to be destructive on myself or anyone outside of myself. And I had a big epiphany about that. And for all you guys that didn't hear that, basically what I'd said is that I had lived within my body for so long with all of that anger, guilt, shame, blame, resentment. But now I live within it with love. See, when we come out of that place of the mind, that very masculine dominated energy where we're projecting all of this anger, this frustration, guilt, blame, shame onto the world, and we start dripping down into this beautiful heart where we're able to feel our way through the world and be able to create some of these healthier boundaries, self-care boundaries, then we're able to really unite and bring that beautiful sacred masculine and divine feminine into balance. Now, there's not just one way to do this. I want to make sure that's clear to all my brothers and sisters out there. This is my personal experience. And this is what I help many men and some women to be able to channel some of that childhood wounding into their own lives. Because the beautiful masculine energy, it can be destructive, but at the same time, it can be very productive. So I'm going to ask you, my brothers and sisters, are you an awakened masculine energy, or are you going to live in the wounded masculine energy?
There you go.
Mm.
There you go.
Mm. Go ahead, Charles.
Oh, it's me? And I didn't know he passed the ball over here.
I'm passing the ball to you.
Man, like I said, I'm still kind of just exploring some of that that vulnerable side for myself too as well, and very impressed by a lot of people who are opening up and sharing. Even right now, we're looking at comments of people, sharing their truth. And like I said, for me, it's always just astonishing to see people just be so open to share their truth. And once again, those are the certain traits that I may have gotten from my father and my mother, where I'm more kind of reserved and private per se, about certain truths, and trying to break those things and make sure that but one thing is I have identified it definitely, and have always said, you know what, I want to be different from what my mother or my father was, and make sure that I'm always watching even the small things about what I do, what I say. I mean, every word that comes that comes out my mouth, I want to make sure that it's uplifting, it's upbuilding, it's never discouraging, that it's led with guidance the best way I can. So it's been a journey for me, man, and a short journey, but I'm here for the ride, and giving thanks and praise, and hopefully we'll end up being that father, that husband, that son, that the best that I can be. So
yeah, love that, brother.
That dude, that's great. Wow. I wish I had that.
Yeah.
What you just said is if you could do that with your kids, bring them up, show them how great they are, their powerfulness, their individuality, and that lovingness. That's the masculine energy.
Mm-hmm.
That's the healed, assertive masculine energy, going in and saying to your kids, you're amazing, you're fantastic, you can do anything you want to do, and start to instill that in them. I never received that from my father at all. I never received any of that from both my parents. I had to find that myself. I had to find it through going into therapy, and then some sort of intuitive thing popped in me through how miserable I was in this life before I turned 40, that finally got me to see it and realize that I needed to change my life, because I never received from my father. I always sought from my father. I was a baseball player. That was my first passion. That's what I wanted to do with my life. And never once did I ever hear my father say, you're good. I heard him say it to other people, but he couldn't open up his heart enough to show that love, because then he would have to move into a place of vulnerability. And Charles, that you just said it, dude. That is what a lot of guys out there are seeking from their father, is you are wonderful, you are good, you can. It's that place. And if you could do that, dude, that's the one of the most amazing things that you could do for a child and somebody growing up, because I had to do that for myself. But before I end, Jay, the answer to your question, you said it earlier. I think for everyone out there, what we're doing right now is asking people to become aware of all of this within them. Opening up a place in your heart, in your mind, just to, when we all shared what our experiences are and what we're learning, there's a part in our lives that we had to eventually start to become aware of how we were holding on to mom and dad, or dad here, and blaming and shaming themselves. So if you could just ask yourself, can I become aware of where I am with my relationship with the masculine energy, or the relationship with my father, whether your father is still here or not. Just become aware of your behaviors, of how you formed relationships. Become aware where there's maybe some anger and resentment towards dad. This is just an awareness, so you can move into a place as the adult to begin to shift and change that in yourself to become more peaceful. But dude, Charles, man, I commend you.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, brother.
Thank you, brother.
You know, I want to take a moment here. I'm going to break it down just a little bit more. I'm going to go a little deep, as Evis said this morning in the Land Down Under, as he was in that misty gray outback. It was quite beautiful watching you come in live. You know, I think what happens for us as men and women, when we have had a relationship with a parent, a father, that was disconnected, where as children we didn't get our needs met the way we wanted to, or perhaps even needed to, for different reasons. And we spend our adulthood chasing to have those needs met. And when I say we spend our adulthood chasing it, I'm going to go a little deep here, because what I'm inferring is the inner child within us that's still alive, that still has temper tantrums, that still gets scared, that still wants to play, that still gets hungry, bored, lonely, and tired, is waiting for their father figure to show up in their life. For women, for some women, it's chasing that relationship of the man who is going to fulfill those needs that they didn't get met as a child, if they lacked it in their relationship with their dad. And what I had to learn for myself was that it was no longer the responsibility of my mom or dad to meet my needs, to make me feel better as an adult, to take care of me, to remove those inner, referred to as a dark night of the soul, those painful loneliness that still remained as an adult. And where that brought me to was that it ultimately is my responsibility to learn how to parent myself and to provide the nurturing, the nourishment, and the love, the unconditional love to myself, so that I no longer I could take that responsibility away from my dad and from my mom and put it where it belongs, which is on me. And when I finally woke up from my long sleepwalking and understood the power within myself, that I could learn how to parent myself, what it meant for me was that I had to practice what I refer to as the 3 C's. The first one is clarity. The second one is courage. And then the third one is just commitment. And it's simple, not easy. Because many people just, even when they understand that, they're not willing to practice. Commitment takes practice. And practice is the gateway. Is the gateway to self-love. Is a gateway to parenting that little boy and that little girl that deserves it. And we don't need to keep seeking it from relationships outside of ourselves. We can give ourselves all that we need. But it's not going to come from just thinking or from a self-help book. It's going to come from action. And that's where self-care comes in. And so, Ev, what do you make of that?
Yeah, man. Wow, Jay. And you topped it on the head, man. That's where the action, that's where the healed masculine energy comes in. It steps into its role. I'm here in Saturn's day. You guys over there still on your Friday, comes into the Sun's day tomorrow. On the Saturn's day, we're basically, Saturn is ruling. Saturn is father. It is authority. It is time. But for me, it is also discipline. So when you become you, the own disciple, your own disciple of your life, and you start putting some of these things that we've talked in, this discipline, taking ownership, responsibility, being able to let go, having courage, then you start to balance out some of this destructive masculine energy. You know, I quickly started off tonight about that Star Wars film, as many of us would have saw. And one of those last scenes for me was really beautiful, because you see the last scene of Darth Vader, the father, with his son, Luke Skywalker. And he asks him, Luke, can you take off my helmet? I want to see you with my own eyes. He takes off the mask. And he said, Luke, tell your sister you were right. And what he meant by that he did have good within him, but he also had the bad. So we as human beings, it is who we are. And when we take ownership that there is darkness, that there is light, then we're able to really balance out these energies and really navigate our way through this beautiful thing we call life. So that's how I might finish, my brother.
Love it, brother. Love it.
Beautiful, beautiful. Jeff Fasano, I'm going to give you 2 minutes because, believe it or not, we are just over the hour. We've been on the air for just over an hour, and I think it's time for us to put a pretty bow on the show and call it a wrap. So, Jeff, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to put your closing wisdom on this topic of our relationship with our fathers.
Wow. I'm going to go back to awareness. I'm going to ask everybody to take what you've heard tonight on this show about this topic, take it to heart, because one of the most important things we could do as adults is begin to individuate from mom and dad, individuate from dad. We have to individuate into the people that we are to be, the people that the person that we want to be. So it's about, as Evis just said and Jay just said, it's about taking that action. The way you could take that action is to begin to just become aware of everything about your relationship to dad and your relationship to the masculine energy. And just bring to your awareness and your consciousness how you may still be holding on to dad, how maybe you're holding on to the resentment, the hate, the looking at dad as an icon, having everyone measure up to dad. It's about individuating into your own self and who you are. So you can simply just look at dad as someone who is in your life, who is just another person. You can break that chain and start to live your own life as the individuated adult you are.
There you go. Love it. Love it.
Charles, speaking of love, I'm loving you tonight.
Thank you, brother.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And I love you every night. It's just not tonight. There's no conditions to love. Not in this, not in Real Men, Real Talk Live. Not here, not now. Charles, you got 2 minutes to put a wrap.
You know, I think I did say enough. I think that once again, man, there's seasons. And all of us have different seasons. Even like tonight, I don't normally get lonely per se. You know, obviously when I don't have the kids, I'm staying busy with work. But it was just one of those nights where I was just like, tonight, right about 4 o'clock, and it hit, and I was like, man, I'm alone tonight, you know, and I felt lonely, if that makes sense, you know, because I don't have any friends per se out here, don't have any family out here, and other than my kids, and I'm always just working, and that keeps me busy. But then there's that other side where it was like today, it was just like, man. So, you know, one of the things I'm going to do when I get off too is call my mom, because, you know, as someone who is dealing with some of the things and issues and health issues, I'm sure she gets lonely, and it kind of made me understand tonight how she might be feeling right now. So once again, whether it's your mom or your dad, I'm learning, I'm growing, man, I'm maturing, and this is the season. Sometimes you got to go through a river of crap to come out clean on the other side, and it's okay. You know, if I got to take a couple of L's today and this week, that's okay. I'm gonna pull it back together, and that season of reaping is going to be unbelievable. So
beautiful, brother.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's amazing, Charles. Yeah, Charles, you brought it home tonight.
Try, man. I'm learning.
No, you did. You did. Here's my closing thoughts real quick. I believe that there's hope for all of our relationships, all of our viewers and listeners. And why I believe that is that because there was a time in my life where my relationship was fractured. My relationship was wounded with my mom and dad. And as I shared, I went through 2 periods, 4 years and 4 years, where I detached physically, thinking that if I was detached physically, that I'd be okay. And the truth is that it didn't really change much, because that pain was still inside of me, because I wasn't willing to do the work to heal the wounds. And so the hope comes in is that I personally was willing to go through, you know, step into that path, into that journey, when I finally had the courage, and heal those wounds for myself so that I can come home. And coming home for me was about making amends, first to myself, for all the damage that I caused in my own personal relationships, and to make the amends to my parents and be at peace with it. Because when I was finally willing and able to do that, it really changed all my relationships in my life. The most important one being with me. And so what's really sticking with me right now is Abigail's comment earlier in the show. And all I will say to you is this, is that regardless if your parents are ready, regardless of what your parents are willing to do or not to do, it's irrelevant. Mm-hmm. The only thing that matters is what you are willing to do for yourself. Mm-hmm. And a time will come in this lifetime or not, when you will be at peace with your relationship with your parents. It's not about them being ready. You don't need them to be ready. You just need to be ready to start healing your relationship with them. And I know it's possible, because that's how I had to begin. And I'm grateful today that I was able to make amends to my dad shortly before he passed. My mom's still alive, and I have a healthier relationship with her than I've ever had. I look forward to that phone call. I look forward to that text. I look forward to that video chat today. And even though I don't maybe understand everything that she feels, I don't have to. I just have to be willing to honor her for who she is today, and honor her as my mom, and thank her, knowing that she did the best that she could with what she had, what she was given, and that today it's enough. And I can let go of all that. And with that, I get to experience a life of freedom, inner freedom. And so thank you, viewers and listeners. If you heard something tonight that resonated with you, Please share it out. Share it with your friends. Share it with your family members. Share it with your partners, your siblings. And we thank you for showing up tonight and being a part of this conversation. We'll catch you guys next week. Next week, hopefully Josh will be back in the studio, coming in somewhere across the United States. We love you guys. Evis, Jeff, and Sir Charles, thank you for joining me this evening on Real Men, Real Talk Live. We'll see you next week.
Peace.
Peace.
Love you guys.